Hello, everyone, and welcome to this fireside chat of RevEx Fest, the Revenue Excellence Festival. Today's event is brought to you by the team at Modern Sales Pros. For those of you not familiar with Modern Sales Pros, we are the world's largest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations, and sales enablement, aka our Modern Sales Pros. Our mission is to create an environment for our members to answer the toughest revenue questions out there. And if you're not a member yet, you'll be invited to join right after this summit. This summit would not be possible without our amazing sponsors who you see here in this slide. Big thanks to them for making RevEx Fest possible. And to learn more about these innovative companies, click on the Sponsors Booth tab at the top of this event. Also, check out our packed agenda by visiting the Agenda tab at the top of this event page to see our full schedule of events. If you missed anything, the recordings will be available at the Modern Sales Pros website. Now, here's our agenda for this session. I will go over some housekeeping notes, and then our fireside speakers will do intros and then we'll get into the content. But before we dive into content, today, here are some housekeeping notes. This event is being recorded, and if you have any questions for our panelists, please use the Q&A function on the right side of your screen. Also, this chat is wide open, so please do interact with each other. Lastly, go ahead and check out our amazing speakers and sponsors by navigating to the tabs at the top of your screen after this event. You might find some ungated resources and some gifts from our sponsors right there. Now let's get started with this exciting fireside chat. I'll pass it off to Pete. He will be our moderator today. Pete, you can take it from here.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much. Hey, Elon, how are you?
Hello, glad to be here. Hi there, Pete.
I am super pumped to have you. Thank you for staying up to all hours of the evening in Israel to talk with us. I really appreciate that. Folks, for folks who are not familiar, I'm super pumped to be joined today by Elon Reshef, one of the founders and the chief product officer at Gong. We're gonna have a fun fireside chat here, talking about a variety of topics from creating a pretty world-killing category to now kind of like new challenges in the space and kind of like how Elon got there. But for by way of introduction, really quickly, for folks who don't know me, I'm Pete Kazanji. I'm one of the founders of Atrium. Atrium makes data-driven sales management software. It's software that helps sales managers, leaders, and reps use metrics to improve their performance. And prior to Atrium, I started a software company called TalentBin. It was a recruiting software company that was acquired by Monster Worldwide in 2014. And at TalentBin, that was kind of how I got into modern sales. Came from a product management and a product marketing background, and kind of went, kind of realized that somebody needed to sell this software, and went from being our first sales rep to our sales manager, sales leader, and eventually was responsible for new product sales at Monster Worldwide after we were acquired. Subsequent to that, ended up writing a book on startup sales called Founding Sales, and of course started Modern Sales Pro. So that's a little bit about me. For folks who are not familiar with Elon, I mean, if you aren't familiar with Gong, I don't know what you've been doing, because like anytime you see purple anywhere in the world, I immediately think Gong. Like I could be walking down the street and I'm like, Gong, oh, Gong, right? If you're watching the Super Bowl, you see Gong. If you're on LinkedIn, you see Gong. Elon's one of the founders. So Elon, maybe you could tell folks a little bit about like what you spend your time doing at Gong, and then what you've done prior to that.
Sure. So, well, welcome everybody. My name is Elon. I'm one of the founders, as Pete mentioned, and the chief product officer at Gong. So most of my time is spent kind of working with customers, understanding their needs, and building a product that hopefully brings tons of value to everybody. Assuming you know Gong, if not, we're sort of the leading revenue intelligence solution platform that helps organizations run revenue based on reality. So happy to be here.
Based on reality, I love that. I forget when you guys adopted that kind of framing, but I think it's like really kind of crystalline. It's like, goodbye opinions, hello reality. I think that's fantastic. And like, I think the good news about it is it's not constrained just to call recording. which is something that we're going to talk about a little bit later. But so I think actually prior to Gong, you actually, this is your first sales technology product, right? So prior to Gong, you worked on marketing tech product. What's been different about a sales tech product like Gong versus I feel that your last software company was in the MarTech space.
Yeah, so last company was kind of e-commerce infrastructure. This one is obviously sales technology or revenue technology nowadays. It's fun. It's much more fun. I got to tell you this, when you kind of sell a marketing software, there's going to be 5 users for 5 users are going to use the system. They're going to do something at scale, right? Maybe send a billion emails, I don't know, get reports, whatever. Salespeople, the nice thing about it, you actually serve actual human beings. In the end of the day, you kind of bring value. They like the solution or hate the solution. That's fine as well. They give you feedback. You can iterate with them. So it's all about building software that people actually use and love. This is totally energizing.
I love that. Yeah, salespeople not shy when you know, sharing feedback. Yeah, I mean, this is something that we really love at Atrium too. Like one of the things that's kind of unique about Atrium is like we actually sell on customer data. So like, you know, the way that we sell, like someone turns on an Atrium account, takes like 5 minutes to turn on. It's kind of like Datadog in that regard. You just, you know, do a read-only OAuth connection to the CRM. And so what our AEs really enjoy is like they're showing customers like what's going on in their organization and kind of like the upsides and the downsides and like, you know, the strengths and the weaknesses of various reps right then and there. But also they like selling to salespeople is really kind of fun because like everyone knows what we're here to do. It's not like we're kind of like pussyfooting around the conversation. It's like, cool, are you ready to, like, I'm going to set an agenda really quickly here and then maybe we can get into some discovery questions. Does that work for you as an upfront contract? And everyone's like, yeah. And it could be like, it's very, very candid. Like, hey, can I, you know, just shoot me straight. Can I forecast this for this month? Or is this gonna, like, where are we at here? I need to update my pipeline because my manager is all over me. Yeah, you can forecast it this month. Great. Yeah, it is a little bit of a change, I would imagine. So one thing that I'm like, how old is Gong at this point? 7 years?
Yeah, 7 years. I think the first employee joined us at November 2015, so that's almost 7 years.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of wild to think like 7 years ago, the idea of like if you ask somebody, how do you guys record your sales calls? They'd be like, what are you talking about, right? And whereas now it's like, you don't record your sales calls? What are you, like, are you crazy? Get out of here. And of course that's the work of category creation, which is, you know, it's not the easiest thing in the world. I would love to kind of get your perspective on what you think has been like the hardest parts of creating what originally was, you know, the call recording conversation intelligence category, which is now expanded to other use cases, other reality-based use cases. But just to start, what was the biggest challenges, the biggest rewards? Like, you know, what would be your kind of advice to people who are tackling that? Because there's a lot of people in the modern sales community right now who are sales leaders who are selling new categories that like don't exist and like trying to evangelize people to do something that's like they've never even heard of before, even considered. How did you tackle that?
Yeah, it's a good question. And you know, Gong is now revenue intelligence, maybe kind of backtrack 4 years. It used to be conversation intelligence. So when we started, we knew there's a challenge of people don't really know what's happening in sales. Why are deals being lost? And of course, people expected everything to be in a CRM. If only people would put everything in a CRM, right? Not going to happen.
If only.
Yeah, and then we decided to sort of start with, you know, automating the process. We kind of automate this idea of typing stuff into a CRM away. Started with video, then phone calls, emails, and so on. So when we started, it was mostly about, or maybe initially even only about video call analysis and recording. So we called this conversation intelligence, and then we added emails and other types of deals, and then became revenue intelligence. In both cases, there's a couple of things. First of all, you got to solve a problem that actually exists in the marketplace, right? Nobody knows, as you said, 7 years ago, people didn't realize that was a problem. You have to sort of educate the market. And you have to sort of tell the story in a way that kind of captures a holistic problem and then a solution for it. So in the conversation intelligence days, it was, how can I understand more about how my calls are going? In the revenue intelligence right now is, how can I get more a better understanding of what's going on in my entire pipeline? And again, we call it using reality because it's based on real data. And it's all about,
Yeah.
well, coming up with a message, making sure it's consistent with customers' perception, sticking to it quite a
Sure.
bit. So I see companies sometimes like trying to
Yes.
pivot every 3 months. That never works. And good marketing that my colleagues have done. I haven't been part of that, and that's always helpful. So
Yeah. I mean, I think yeah, just repeating yourself to your blue in the face is something that is extraordinarily important. I think we've seen that over here at Atrium, where we talk about data-driven sales management. Data-driven sales management, like as a manager, if you're not managing by metric, you're you're fighting with one hand tied behind your back, and it's a modern way of managing. And so like you just have to repeat and repeat and repeat, and it's got to. And I think the other thing too is it's not just like from a marketing standpoint, but then when people come in to the product from a marketing standpoint, whether it's like top of funnel, like if you have a PLG motion, I don't think Gong, if I recall correctly, doesn't have a product led motion. But even if you're like, in a pilot, or then also from a success standpoint, like all that messaging has to be aligned all the way through, right? So someone shows up in the product and it's like, yeah, you're here to, to like make your calls better, right? Like understand what's actually going on there. I think another thing that you touched on is really critical there, which is like the automating of things to start. I think is like the less behavior change there has to be, the better off that you are. And I think this is one of the things that, like, at least with conversation intelligence, that is so powerful, is literally it's just like, hey, connect this to your calendar and it's just going to start showing up. It's just going to start
exactly,
showing up.
time to value is super important, I think, in general, because people are so busy. Gong has had the sort of maybe luck or maybe the insight to sort of really bring kind of very fast time to value. I had a CEO, I met him one day at the party, and he basically said, I turned on Gong, and within 3 minutes, I would get like a summary of a conversation one of my reps had that had competition, and it pointed me to where I need to listen, and I can listen to this, and I was like, oh shit, now I know something about the business that I didn't know before. That was like literally minutes after installation. So that's pretty impactful. Many tools just require implementation and months of setup. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think that that's something that people can really, like, either if you're in product development, or even if you're in sales, and because sometimes, as sales leaders, what we have to do is we have to go, like, you have to go to war with the army you have. You have to sell the product that you have, and like oftentimes you can complain and say, Elon, I need this feature, this piece right here needs to be automated, et cetera, et cetera. But a lot of the times what you can do is you can kind of do that with elbow grease, right? Like you can throw human at it. And this is actually something that we do quite a bit at Atrium. Like, again, as noted, like takes like 5 minutes to set up an account. What we then do is, like, the AEs configure the account. It like takes them like a half hour or like 45 to do it. So it's like, that's why we don't have like a PLG motion. We have like a sales assist motion. But like, and then what we've been doing is like automating it more and more, and kind of making like internal tools that automate that faster. But from the perspective of the user, it's just instant value, right? And I think that's a really important thing in like new category selling, and also like new category product creation, is like, you got to reduce the friction as much as possible, even if that means like doing kind of like Wizard of Oz, man behind the curtain stuff, where like you do some of the work for them in order to like have them have the aha moment where they say, oh, okay, cool, I'm getting to activation energy. I will transact with you and I will commit to this, and then we'll go into our customer success motion. I think that's really really critical. The other thing that we found here at Atrium that ends up being really kind of important is having a great kind of like crawl, walk, run model, right? Like, rather than throwing somebody in the deep end of like whatever your solution is, like helping them, because like they're starting out like doing this thing that they've never done before. How did you guys kind of approach that back when it was only conversation intelligence stuff? Like, what was kind of the maturity model, and how did the product support that, and also how did customer success kind of like activate that as well?
Yeah, so initially we were doing things pretty fast. So I think the concern that we had, and you mentioned this before, is like concern we had is people are not going to want to have their conversation captured. So
Yep.
what we kind of spent a lot of energy is, let's bring a lot of value to the AE or the seller, so that they can actually get value. So initial installation, actually our first customers were kind of more mid-market kind of tech companies. So literally click of a button, they wouldn't even, like, at the time, they wouldn't even worry about security. Now, of course, we kind of done all of the SOC 2s and ISOs and whatnot. And it was pretty quick, and then calls will get recorded automatically. And then when we added like more deal type of functionality, and it's going to be the emails and sort of the CRM stuff, bringing them all together. And it's always been fast to sort of start. And then customer success comes in with, hey, what are the best practices? What are the playbooks? How do I overcome internal objections? How do I roll it out at scale? How do I help you kind of maximize the value out of the implementation?
Yeah, so I think one of the things like time to value is extremely important from a sales standpoint. And so to the extent that the product can like facilitate that as much as possible, that's great. But even if like the product, and obviously there's like feedback loops there where it's like, hey, we're trying to like get this person to an aha moment, and you know, if like these things right here could change a little bit, Mr. Product Leader, Ms. Product Leader, that would help us facilitate that a lot better here in AE land. I think I actually have kind of a funny story for you. Another conversations intelligence vendor in the market was a customer of Atrium's before they were acquired, and they had to cancel all their SaaS contracts. That was sad for us. But one of the things I remember taking one of their reps out to dinner, and they had a really good or drinks, and they had a really great insight, which was like making it during the pilot process or during kind of the initial process, thinking about who's going to get value out of this and how quickly you can get them to value, and then how robust that is, or so like how robust to like failure it is. And so I'll give you an example. So early in conversation intelligence, a lot of the marketing was around things like, hey, you're going to like managers are going to listen to calls, and they're going to help coach their reps up on it. That's obviously a very like that's a great thing that they should be doing. The problem is of course it takes like a bunch of steps in order to achieve that goal, versus a more like robust use case, a use case that like has fewer handoffs is, hey, as a rep, and I think you mentioned this earlier, like delivering value to reps. As a rep, you got 4 4 calls in a day, right? And sometimes, despite your best intentions, some of them are back to back. You don't have the opportunity to kind of like, take your notes or do your follow-ups or whatever. So invariably what's going to happen is you're going to forget when the CFO is coming back from maternity leave and like what her name is, right? And so literally just like jumping back into the call and be like, oh man, I'm so glad that the transcript is there and I can like jump, even if the transcript's not perfect, kind of doesn't matter because I kind of know where it was in the call, and I just jump back and I listen to it at 2x and I'm good to go there. And so when this rep was telling me about it, they were saying, yeah, like when I ran pilots like that, it would, because like the reps would be like, oh my God, how many, like, yeah, I went back to like 4 or 5 calls and it saved my ass. Like, of course I need to buy this, or sorry, of course I'm going to tell sales ops that I need to buy this, or that we need to buy this. The counter of that would be like, hey, Mr. Manager, Ms. Manager, did you go in and like do some call coaching? No, of course I didn't, because I was like, trying to get deals across the line, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's actually a really kind of critical thing, is like think about, how you can do the crawl use case first, and also how like robust it is to potential failure. And it sounds like you guys thought about that quite a bit.
Absolutely. I think the key for us is how do we make the software autonomous so you don't have to sort of do a lot of work, and how do you bring the value directly to the people who need it, right? So if the person needs to know what the action item is, perfect, give it to them. If the manager needs to know what to focus on, give it to them. Versus kind of more of, think about like traditional systems where you have to go through a lot of like motions to sort of get information, data, insights into the hands of people who then have to digest it and then send it to other people. I think this doesn't cut it anymore. So it's all about bringing value to everybody within the organization directly.
Yeah, I think that's the last thing about like bringing value to multiple people in the organization ends up being, can be kind of like a dicey thing, because as a product leader, what you have to think about is like use cases for different personas. Obviously, like where a lot of the impact with Gong and kind of revenue intelligence happens is like with the reps and changing rep behavior. This is why at Atrium we talk about using metrics to change behavior, because like if behavior isn't changed, then like value is not being created. Whether that means like better pipe hygiene, or like better activity, or like diagnosing where like win rate problems are happening, or stage conversion problems, et cetera, et cetera. But the funny thing then is like, okay, cool, you could be creating that economic value with like the reps down here, or maybe with the managers, but it's the SVP of sales who signs off on the the budget, or it's the, the head of sales ops who, I mean, it's kind of like 50-50 in a lot of organizations, like who's in charge of, budgetary decisions or what have you, or maybe it's both, right? Like it's a, it's a group decision. And so you gotta, like, we kind of talk about how like everybody needs to have their little cookie, right? Like you get one, it's like Oprah, right? Like you get a value proposition, you get a value proposition, you get a value proposition. How did you guys think about those value propositions for like those leaders who might not necessarily, like, they may not be listening to calls necessarily, certainly not on a religious basis. And then potentially that, like, as a second level leader, they're probably not doing call coaching either, but they're the ones with the purse strings. So obviously as reps and customer success people, what we do is like we document value that's happening, down here at the user level, and of course like present it to them and say, see, like economic value. But that's kind of more aspirational and like a little bit more enlightened. Giving them something that they can actually like sink their teeth into ends up being powerful. Have you guys done more? I mean, obviously, like with the new forecasting functionality, there's some very serious value propositions there, but I wonder about before that, if there were, like, how you guys thought about that.
It's a combination. So I think as a sales leader, you're kind of wearing two hats. One is, how do I make my people effective, right? So if Gong can basically tell reps, don't forget to send an email because you haven't followed up, that's obviously, bubbles up as value.
It's useful.
It's basically saying, if it helps the manager kind of spot check and see the deals are, I don't know, single threaded, they can kind of course correct that. That's valuable. And then there is value that goes directly to the C-level or VP as a user, which is kind of the more aggregated information. Are people following the the new messaging? Are people, how does my win rate how is it being affected by, I don't know, the type of persona we sell to or the type of customer we sell to? So this is high level stuff. I can tell you that Dan, the COO at the time of LinkedIn, when COVID started, he was getting direct information from Gong around market receptiveness to different offers that they have at the time, because they had to sort of pivot their solutions because of the crisis. And that was directly coming to him, and had tons of business decisions. So this is something I don't think we want to try to quantify, right? How do you quantify a sales leader or a revenue leader or an operational leader making smart decisions, even at the board level?
That's hard.
But obviously it's super like impactful day to day. So.
Yeah, this is something that we seek to do in our organization, because like the primary user of Atrium is like a sales manager, AE manager, SDR manager, or maybe second level there as well. And then of course, sales operations is an internal vendor to those folks. And so, helping them manage by metric is obviously very important. Those are the folks who are high users. But from a customer success standpoint, what we typically try to do is we try to get a set of views communicating to leadership, right? Even if like maybe they like have somebody else interpreting things, like we could, even if it's just kind of like a little celebratory thing, just like want to have it. And of course now a lot of people like use Atrium screenshots and like board decks and QBR decks and things like that. These are all things that we try to facilitate, because what you want to do is like spread it throughout the organization as much as possible. And even to this day, I'm kind of grumpy about how small our little watermark logo is on the views there. This is something that like my product co-founder counterpart and I constantly fight about. He's still winning that fight. So one of the things that is, I mean, there's lots of remarkable things about Gong's growth, but I think one thing that you guys have done an amazing job of is just having a really distinctive voice in the market. I know a lot of that is from your marketing colleagues, but maybe you could talk a little bit about like how you guys go about that as a leadership group, and then how that's impacted the product as well.
Yeah, so the first rule, if you want to have a distinctive voice, is not be afraid to have a distinctive voice. I think one thing you got to do is like say, just I'm willing to have to go different. Maybe you're going to make mistakes, maybe not. So I think from day one, it was, let's be different. Let's not try to be the IBM, have the all blue.
Be okay with it. Be okay with the boo-boos that are going to come along. There are going to be some.
Some people are not going to like it. Some people are going to think it's, I don't know, silly, childish, whatever the thing is. So we've created our own voice. I think the other part is, maintain this voice, keep using it everywhere, so that people kind of get used to this. I think the other thing that is sometimes overlooked, because people just think about the brand aspect of it, which is critical, but also I think we very early on, kind of compared to our growth at that time, we started creating content that was actually helpful, right? People oftentimes do content marketing. It's just like blah, blah, blah. People don't really read. And what we've decided to do from day one is top 10
XYZ.
We're going to provide stuff that actually helps you do your selling better. So we see like numerous people subscribe to Gong's like newsletter and blogs without even being a customer, which is fine by us. And then they're getting valuable tips and advice. So I think this reinforces the fact that, sort of here's the brand, it's telling me something I didn't know, I can use it. Hopefully some of them, most of them, maybe eventually all of them are going to become Gong customers, but it wasn't even about making them customers. The product is not mentioned in our blog post. It's all about how do you kind of operate as a revenue leader. How does kind of looking into reality, understanding what good looks like, can help you execute better.
Which I think it kind of goes to the category creation piece there, which is the first step, like way at the top of the funnel, way up here, is just like problem familiarity, right? Like sell the problem first. Like, doesn't it suck that your reps, like, you spend all this time and energy in order to get the prospect on the call, and then because the rep is like back to back to back, they like don't take a note on XYZ, and like it negatively impacts the deal. And like, are we going to be mad at the rep and be like, oh man, you should like totally, like, why didn't you manage your calendar better? You should have like 30 minutes blocked after every call. Sales is hard, right? It's like kind of like chaos is happening constantly. And so, you could wish that, but then like, why not have an automated backup? So like making people familiar with the pain points associated with first. And so you can do that without actually, and then, but if you're the person who reveals the pain points, and I guess in this regard, maybe like good, like demand gen marketing like that is kind of akin to like good provocative discovery, where you're asking questions, right, that are like leading and provocative and kind of get people to like think about it and be like, yeah, you're right, Elon, that is really annoying. And yeah, and I think it was Chris Orlob who is one of the biggest, kind of like one of the big contributors to all of that content. His stuff was really fantastic, and I know that he was done a bunch of stuff, or like like broke out a pretty big presence on LinkedIn, which actually it wasn't just him. I think a lot of people at Gong did a really good job of leveraging LinkedIn as a distribution network, or like content for before that was like a really popular thing to do. One thing that I know that I mean, actually, we have so over here at Atrium, we have a bunch of Gong customers who are our customers. We have a bunch of I think it's probably like, I don't know, it's probably like 70% of our customers end up having Gong, which is great because like we have an integration with Gong, and we actually we see people who really enjoy using like like visualizing and setting goals on trackers in Atrium. But one of the things that we and it's the only conversation intelligence provider that we're integrated with right now. One of the things that we see is that people are just like have very high product satisfaction with Gong, and they're almost like, I don't know, kind of like rabid about it. I would love to kind of get your perspective on like what drives that, aside from just amazing product leadership. What are like the specific strategies and tactics that have led to that, people being like rabid about something that at the end of the day is like business software?
Yeah, business software. How can people be excited about business software, right? So yes, Gong has been, I think we've been second year in a row, #1 highest satisfaction product on G2, which I kind of made it happy. First year was happy, second year happy. Hopefully and the goal is to keep it for the third year in a row. There's two elements to this. I think one is the product, the other one is how you kind of go about developing the product. The product itself, it really kind of keeps people's back in a way, kind of like they're saying,
Sure.
Gong has my back, because again, if you have an autonomous fly on the wall, it kind of checks all you do and kind of helps you not forget stuff, and anywhere from reminding you to do follow-ups to and telling you deals are not progressing to understanding calls and whatnot. This is something that you can kind of operate at 80% CPU versus like 100% CPU, and you can just sleep better.
Gee, thanks, little buddy. Gee, thanks.
Exactly.
You got my back.
Exactly. And I think from an execution perspective, it's something, our culture at Gong, raving fans is our #1 company principle. We all worry about raving fans, from customer success, sales, product, engineering, everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also, whenever we develop a new product feature, it's all about, our customers going to be raving fans about it, are going to really like it. So we do our best to not develop stuff that just because, I don't know, somebody asked or some competitor decided it's important, or I don't know, some random idea, but it's all like validated with customers. It's co-developed with, we always have design partners for every single feature. So by the time we release a feature to market, yeah, every single feature, there's usually like half a dozen to a dozen design partners. We are now launching a generation 3 call it a conversation understanding, something that you kind of really amazing. It's like you can do something semantic, right? You say, show me all of the places where somebody's talking about I'm having issues. And then it's going to find any time people say anything about it. Issues, I'm having trouble. I'm not seeing this.
All the synonyms.
Yeah, it's not just even synonyms, like concept, the same concept. And it's really radical,
Yeah.
but it took us, many months to develop, but we have dozens of design partners working with us. Oh, does this work for you? How are you going to be using this? How does this affect your analytics? How is this goes above and beyond, what other people might be doing, which is kind of keywords and trackers and other things. So this is super exciting. By the time we get it to market, it's already been used by dozens of customers, hopefully successfully. So that brings the next set of customers to be really happy about it. I can tell you that the first customer who's using a software, like our software, I've seen customers using like the first design partner hitting the save button, the thing doesn't even save. But the rest of the thousands of customers
love those. Yeah.
but
well,
by the time it goes to market, people love it. So
yeah, so it's bulletproof. I love that. That's so fantastic. Where do you guys some kind of like tactical questions for you on that? Hopefully it's not too geeky for everybody here in the audience, but one, how do you elicit that audience of people who are open to using broken software? Because for all of us who work in the software industry, like when it starts out, it's usually pretty broken. You see like version 5. Ideally, you see like customers see version 5, and like because it takes a lot of iteration to get there. Where do you how do you collate those folks who are down to do that?
yeah, so usually you want to find people who have this business pain and they want to solve it. Like when we launched our forecast product, many months kind of roll out to sort of -6 months or 9 months. We found people who are like, hey, forecasting is a big problem for us. We actually are early adopters, so we want to try out something new. We're open to sharing what we think. We're open also to learn through the process how we should be forecasting and how other players are doing it. And then they work with us hand in hand. They have weekly calls, and then they get in the end of the day, they get stuff that actually fits their needs, and they're very kind of deliberate about it. And the best compliment for me as a product leader is people ended up like posting on LinkedIn. We're excited to be the first paying customer for Forecast, and it's been a really, really fun process, which is great. Now 3 months in, we have more than 100 paying customers, so that's like been a fast ramp. But a big part of it was, the first dozen design partners who really kind of gave us tons of time to iterate and play around with it. So
that's awesome. And so like the product manager is just like arm in arm. I think it's funny, like maybe what's making me think about this is it sounds very similar to probably how you guys developed CI initially 7 years ago or whatever, where you start with initial beta users who like you do the customer development interviews, they validate that the problem exists, validate that it's unsatisfactorily solved to date, get people who are bought in order to solve that problem, to partner with you, and then ideally, and then kind of iterate, and be like minimum viable, minimum valuable, and then like now you've got something that's pretty rad. Little harder to do when you have like, you guys have thousands of customers at this point like, using the product. Do you from very tactically, do you guys like have feature flagging that you have in place in order to facilitate that?
Yeah. Feature flagging is sort of the basics. And then we started with what we call one pod. I mean, when we started with me, I still did some coding, and then just like a bunch of people developing the first version. I think now at our scale, we have, 30-ish like pods. One is, working on forecasting. One is sort of how do you do pipeline review. One is how do you kind of help reps kind of follow up, what we call assist. One is how do you export data into your Snowflake environment, whatever the thing is.
Sure.
And then each one uses their own feature flag around how do they develop. To be, the funny stuff is literally maybe a couple of weeks ago, our feature server actually was gonna almost like broke because there's so many feature flags in the system. So I mean, yeah, it's at scale, it's kind of harder to do, but as long as each pod is autonomous, we can deliver multiple feature areas to multiple customers simultaneously.
Love it. Shout out to Atrium customer Launch Darkly, who makes feature flagging as a service software. So so you don't have to maintain that internally. You can you can have your engineers working on value added product as opposed to your internal. So you guys are 30 Scrum teams now. Good Lord, that's
ballpark.
ballpark. Yeah, that's a lot. Well, I mean, we can just like look on LinkedIn, right? Like that's a lot of product velocity right there, which I think is probably important because I think what kind of two things I wanted to talk with you about, and that's really kind of cool about like the product satisfaction and like where that comes from is like people who are very focused on that from a cultural standpoint, but then also just making sure that you have like, tight integration from a, from a design partner standpoint. I think when conversation intelligence first started out about like 6 or 7 years ago, 8 years ago, it was a pretty competitive space to start, like and pretty highly capitalized. I would love to talk a little bit about and what's especially fun is like at the time it's like a competitive space where there's a couple players in the market who like have this like secret and this insight, like this is going to make sense, and then of course like the market is like, nah, you guys are crazy, like recording calls, that's like big brother stuff, get out of here. And of course like you guys knew something, you knew a secret that of course like this was going to be table stakes in the world, but you still had to compete with those other folks. Now we're at a stage where like that's a fait accompli, everyone kind of understands that that's required, and it's a different realm of competition. What I wanted to talk about first was what were kind of the key ways that that you guys did product development and went to market early in during the CI era, that given the fact that it was such a competitive space, which like arguably you guys definitely won. How did you guys do that in the the 2016 2017 time period that really kind of like moved the needle for you?
Yeah, so I think other players started before us, maybe 2 or 3 vendors, maybe 3 months, a year before us. Some players started right after us. For us, the key was actually to focus on customers. It's sort of the same notion of raving fans. It's like the thought process has been and still is, by the way. So if you deliver great software to customers and focus on their needs and run fast and focus just on that and on making those customers happy, the flywheel is going to work and kind of pull more and more and more customers along those lines. So it's always been focused less on competition per se, focus on good execution, on delivering great product. I think one of the biggest compliment, I actually shared it in Gong with a customer call that they had with my product team, is one customer said, what I like about Gong is they've evaluated Gong 3 times against competition. And they basically said, what I like about Gong, each time I evaluate Gong, I mean, the 3rd time customer in a new company. So like each time I re-look at Gong in fresh eyes, you seem to be developing stuff we actually need versus some of your competition that develop stuff they think we need. So I think if you had to sort of summarize it, it was all about like really, really honing in on a real customer problem and solving it. Not that we have never developed something that eventually we found out was not as useful as we had thought, but it's really like making sure that you kind of nail it and we address a real market need and something that actually makes an impact, right? Makes people raving fans.
Yeah. Well, you guys are right, obviously, in retrospect. But I think one of the challenges though is that when you're right, other people then are like, hey, those guys, those crazy guys out in Tel Aviv were totally right. Hey, can we record calls? Oh, hey, we can. Can our software engineers work on that? And so I think that one of the things that this is the thanks you get for being a category innovator, is everyone else goes like, oh, okay, good idea, guys. Thanks. We're gonna start doing it. So now that call recording kind of like is being added to lots of other kind of like sales engagement or kind of like digital selling platforms, or even like the enablement vendors are getting into it as well, because obviously there's like the workflow piece of it, which is like, hey, I'm a seller and like this is my workflow and record things so I can go and find them. And then of course there's the enablement piece of it, like, hey, let's make these reps more successful, let's help managers or enablement staff like use this information. So a lot of people are saying like, yeah, we can record stuff too. How have you guys sought to contend with that and differentiate as kind of like the conversation intelligent OGs who now are kind of adding incremental products, even as you have these other vendors who are saying like, yeah, we can just add that over here and like probably not charge for it?
Yeah, I think our assumption for day one that call recording itself is not going to be anything differentiated. I mean, Zoom, we can record it. We're going to call Zoom calls directly. Even transcription is available with Zoom. So I think that was our assumption from day one. And I think the key was, how do you deliver value out of those not just call recordings, right? Emails, other type of engagement data, and how do you kind of drive impact and call it insights or value or operational insights. So how do you kind of make sure that it kind of highlights risk in deals? How do you make sure that it reminds people to follow up on calls? How do you make sure kind of it tells you how to replicate what the best performers are doing? I think when we launched our kind of pipeline inspection capability, that was 2, 3, 4 years ago, the market was like, oh, why do we even need this? How is this related to call recording? How is this related to what you do? I think over time, people realized, people didn't get it. And I think over time, now I think people realize that it's all about the whole thing. You have to drive everything based on reality. So, I mean, anything that you basically do, even like the reason why we launched forecasting and a few months ago was people would see the forecast based in spreadsheets on CRM or something, just type in numbers and there's no way to sort of see where the number is coming from. So just the idea of linking the number to an actual deal, an actual conversation, an actual email that somebody said we're going to buy or not buy is kind of obvious to us, but it isn't obvious in the marketplace. And that's what differentiates our forecast product. But in general, this whole notion of using reality as sort of a component to build higher order value is what we're focused on, not the core recording. I mean, recording is, you can record with your iPhone, I think, as far as I know, right?
Yeah. What do you do? What do you do with it, right? What do you do with it? Yeah, I think that that's shocking to me about pipeline inspection because, one of the things, I mean, Atrium has like one kind of slice of our product is what we call op health views, which is like, a pretty helpful, but not like, crazily built out capability for like inspecting opportunities using like email and calendar data, whatever. No conversation data in there. But one of the reasons why people really like it is because like managers are so focused on deals, so like wanting to understand like what's going on with the deal. And this kind of goes to the thing about like meeting people where they are and kind of like bringing them along. Like our vision for how to do data-driven sales management is to infuse data and metrics into all parts of the management, like what we call a sales management motion. Get it? Cute, right? And so like the notion of like, tracking progress towards goals metrically, right? Like metrical goals or like, views and kind of anomalies and kind of things like that. That's a little bit in the future for a lot of folks. We have like early adopters and kind of early majority kind of really get it. We say like those are our people who like live in the future. And of course, like we have to bear hug them and like follow them to all their different places and like make them superstars and so on and so forth. But if you can give somebody something that kind of like helps them bridge from like their prior way of being to like a future way. So anyway, like I'm just, because like when I talk to customers about like Gong stuff, like anytime a customer has like Gong, we don't really position the opportunity health stuff because it's kind of like, oh yeah, I've got Gong deals for this, like duh. Anyway, let's talk, just kind of wrap up here. I would love to talk about single product versus multi-product, because at this point you guys have conversation intelligence, you got deal boards, I think that's what it's called, deal boards, and then now you have forecasting. Suite like makes sense, like going from strength to strength and like building on like existing capability, which is kind of like the magic of software, not just like existing capability, but also existing customers and so on and so forth. Like how has that changed how you guys develop products, and also how has it changed how you guys do go to market as well?
So developing is the same. I mean, we always roll out kind of new and innovative stuff, whether we package it separately or not. So it's all about innovating. I think we definitely do not want to be the WebEx of the world. Anybody? I mean, maybe some of the people in the crowd, if not even remember WebEx, or that didn't know WebEx because they didn't innovate, right? So it's all about continuously innovating.
I got a WebEx invite yesterday. I was like, what?
See how
it was crazy. I was like, well, I haven't seen one of these in a hot second. No, it was I was like, whoa, that's distinctive.
Yeah, it probably comes with a 386 PC or something. So yeah, so continuously innovating is critical anyway. I think packaging is almost secondary. I think the key thing is, I think much of the market now realizes is that the whole idea of running revenue is changing. And whereas maybe 10 years ago, you could just run it based on data in CRM that people would enter, now it's moving into, well, again, we call it reality-based, but understanding what's happening autonomously. So it's all about changing the whole revenue, like the way you do revenue. So yes, understanding conversation, following up, forecasting, by inspecting pipeline, kind of prospecting, all of these things. I think we are definitely aiming to provide this complete solution There's other people who are going to try. I think we got better technology and kind of more understanding of this reality, without which it's just a workflow tool. But time will tell. So it's all about making sure that we have the pieces built in a way that's going to keep our customers raving fans and keep us to the highest customer satisfaction software, not just throw pieces together and just to sort of check the mark on, yeah, we have it. So.
Nice. I'm getting a theme here. Customer centricity seems like a useful strategy there. Well, just to kind of wrap up here, I would love to kind of get any sort of words to the wise that you might have to our 30,000 sales leaders, sales operations, community members here at Modern Sales. Kind of like what what you see going on in the coming 12 months. Recommendations that folks should be thinking about how to leverage technology in order to improve their sales organization. Just any sort of Elon brain droppings would be very useful there. what would your thoughts be?
Yeah, I'll give two things. My very biased view is go kind of continue looking at at least at us as Gong is sort of providing a wider and wider platform where you can drive all of your revenue operations. It's kind of revolutionizes a lot of the things you're doing today. The other part is, as you're looking at the current economy, don't get overstressed. I mean, it's hard for many companies right now with the current economy, but there's ups and downs, and just it's important to kind of keep to see where the North Star is and keep kind of working towards that. And eventually, when there's going to be an upturn, the successful companies who've kind of played nicely throughout the peers are going to thrive again. So keep the lights on.
I love it. Excellent. Well, Elon, this is super fantastic. It's not every day that our community gets to hang out with the evil product genius behind a massive new category that is pretty much revolutionized the way that organizations sell. I mean, already it was revolutionary, and then all of a sudden, 50% of sales organizations are now hybrid or remote or whatever it is. I couldn't imagine doing that without call recording, and of course now you guys are adding on more capability on top of that. So thank you very much for taking the time to hang out with our community, and next time you're out on the West Coast, please do hit me up and we'll hang out. Okay.
Sure. Thanks for inviting me, Pete.
Okay, bye.
Hey guys, that was awesome. Pete and Elon, thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing all your knowledge with us. And thank you for being here with us at RevEx Fest. Audience, same thing. Thank you for being here. Thank you for participating in the chat. Stick around because we have one more session today. Cream of the crop, VC operating partners on cross-pollinating excellence. So stick around and watch what those amazing speakers have to say. I'll see you in a little bit.